Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
I have never been patient. In college, I would eat my dinner at 4 p.m. in the afternoon so I wouldn't have to wait in line. And even then, I would choose what I was going to eat based on which station had the shortest line. And yet, with all my planning and all my efforts to avoid it, I find myself, like everyone else, waiting. In the hospital where I work, there is so much waiting. In fact, you all might know this, hospitals are huge buildings full of waiting rooms where people of all ages, all races, all genders and languages wait to learn about what's happening inside their bodies and in turn, what will happen with their lives. I have found myself in waiting rooms lately, not for anything serious, but nonetheless, I find myself sitting in that discomfort of waiting. What will I learn? What if it changes everything? Over the course of my life, being in the waiting room has changed. Now, rather than flipping through the available magazines left on the coffee table, I pull out my iPhone and Google all the things the doctor might tell me. Once I'm convinced I know what my ailment is, I read celebrity gossip, distressing news articles, my work emails, and maybe if I'm conscious enough to look up from my phone, I notice that everyone in the waiting room around me is doing the same thing. My New England sensibilities suggest to me that trying to talk with someone else in the waiting room would be unwelcome and awkward, but I can't help and wonder if it would be better if we did wait together more intentionally. What if we compared our fears of what waits for us in our appointments? What if we distracted one another or comforted each other? When I am working as a chaplain, this is much easier. A huge part of my job is to talk to people while they wait. My presence is a disruption to the doom scrolling and the mindless candy crushing. I meet people waiting for test results, for diagnoses, treatment plans, rehabilitation referrals, and discharge dates. My experiences with people who are waiting has taught me that a lot can happen in that time. That waiting, which is so frustrating, may actually be invaluable. A few months ago, I was asked to visit a woman in her 70s who was dying. Her breathing was shallow, but still regular enough that I knew she would live for a few days. Her niece was at her bedside, one of her only living family members. The niece had a laptop in her lap that was open, and when I introduced myself, she said, "I'm waiting for my doctor to let me into a Zoom appointment. Could you please pray with my aunt that she will be at peace and go to heaven?" So I figured she didn't really want to chat. I knelt by her aunt, saying the words I felt best, praying for what she asked for. And when I stood up, the patient's niece looked at me and I noticed that she had her brow furrowed with a question. "Do you ever wonder," she began hesitantly, "if we just believe in heaven to make ourselves feel better?" "Yes," I said, before asking, "What made you think of that now?" "Well," she said, "I've spent so much time sitting with her, watching her breathe and waiting. I can't help but think about it. My aunt has been through so much. I really hope that whatever comes next is better than this, but maybe that is just because it would make me feel better." I stayed with her there, not providing any answers, but listening to the questions that she was asking in this time of grief and uncertainty. When I left, she was still waiting for the doctor to let her into the Zoom room for their appointment and for her aunt to die But I believe in her waiting, something was happening. The waiting gave her time to really be present with her questions, to consider her fears and her desires, to consider this time between life and death. For all the boredom, frustration, and anxiety that we can feel when we are waiting, it is time that invites us to be present. Despite the enticing distraction of cell phone screens, we are still there with ourselves for as long as it takes. We have to surrender to time that is not our own. Lately, the waiting that feels most unbearable for me is waiting for political and societal change. Maybe you all can relate. I'm waiting for people to wake up. I'm waiting for there to be, for people to see this corruption, this greed, this cruelty, to see that it doesn't have to be this way. It could be different, for people to be held accountable. And it's not like we aren't doing anything while we wait. I know I am. And I'm seeing people at protests, people making phone calls, learning about law and policy. I watched Bad Bunny get a standing ovation at the Grammys when he said, "Ice out." That's pretty cool. And I have friends who've already bought hundreds of whistles to hand out here in Boston so we can protect each other if we see ice. I joined an online action hour a few weeks ago with dozens of Unitarian Universalists from across the whole country making phone calls asking to end funding to ICE. And I went to one and there were 12, one every day for 12 days. How cool is that? And it's good to know that this waiting is not useless, because if any of you are considering civil disobedience or something else that might be a more active way to push back against what's happening, that also involves waiting. Has anyone here been to a sit-in before? It's a lot of waiting. I recently learned that one of the actions people are taking is creating traffic jams to keep ICE officers from getting to their victims. Intentionally sitting in traffic, that is waiting. And if you ever get arrested, wow, get ready to wait. So with that in mind, I'm just thinking, what are you waiting for right now? Maybe you're also waiting for these societal changes, but also maybe you're waiting to just feel better. Maybe you're waiting for something in your personal life to change. Maybe you're waiting to find a new love, or you're waiting for a doctor to tell you what's going on inside your body. I invite you just to take a breath right now. Let's take a breath in and out. Just notice what that feels like. Just to notice and name what you're waiting for, what you're longing for. Notice what it would be like to be present with yourself in this waiting, to not avoid it, to not distract yourself from it. And in this noticing, you can even invite yourself to imagine the experience of others who are waiting. Maybe other loved ones you know are waiting for something challenging, or maybe family members who are waiting for their loved ones to be released from detention centers, or people who are waiting for justice, people who are waiting to feel safe again or to be free from suffering. We can join with them. We have Googled everything we can about how to make this better, and of course we can do more. But action creates change over time, and waiting for that time to pass can be excruciating. It can feel like an eternity. Because while we wait for change, people are being separated from their families, people are being hurt, people are suffering, people are losing their lives. And if you are like me, you've also researched the worst case scenario for any of these possibilities, the greatest catastrophe, and feel the anxiety of all that could mean. In the waiting, though, we can also find ourselves again. We are reminded of what we love because we are afraid of losing it. What if in our waiting we have an opportunity to not just listen to what could go wrong, but to imagine what could go right? What do you really want? What do you desire for yourselves, for others, for this world? What if it's possible? The next time you catch yourself in the discomfort of waiting, I invite you to put your phone away and embrace it. If that feels unbearable, I have a few suggestions. Take a breath, just like we did just now. Pray or meditate, whatever feels authentic to you. Allow yourself the time you have to get grounded and centered. Find that still small voice inside of you and listen to the wisdom it has to share. Rest. You can use this time to rest, to close your eyes, to daydream, take a break. If you have a pen and paper, you could journal. Write down what's coming up for you emotionally while you wait. What are you afraid of? What are you hoping for? And save that to read in the future when you know how everything turns out. Another suggestion, sing. Why not? Especially if you're alone in your car. That's like a really safe place to sing. I recently heard a story from a UU Mass Action program. This was a colleague of mine, Reverend Annie Gonzalez. She shared about a time when she was riding in a van after getting arrested. She was on her way to jail. She'd just done an act of civil disobedience to try to shut an ICE detention center. This was back in 2017. And when she was in the van, she looked across from her and there was a young 18-year-old. And he looked at her and he saw Reverend Annie's collar and he said, "Excuse me, what kind of minister are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm a Unitarian Universalist." And he said, "Me too. Can we sing Blue Boat Home?" And they did. And I just love that story. One more suggestion of what to do while we wait. This is from poet Naomi Shihab Nye, and I think this is my favorite suggestion. This is her poem, Gate A4. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal after learning my flight had been delayed for 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled on the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight attendant. "Talk to her. What's her problem? We told her her flight is going to be late, and she did this." I stopped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. "Shudawa, shubidak, habiti, stani shwe min fadlik shubit sui." The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for a major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who's picking you up? Let's call him." So we called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he spoke to her for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they have 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some other Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She'd pulled out a homemade sack of mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts from a bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar, smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from 2 huge coolers, and little girls were running around with their cookies and their apple juice, and they were so happy. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green, furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying and confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive of any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Not everything is lost. While we wait, we can help one another. We can use the time to listen to our fears, our anxieties, and our hopes. And while it feels like an eternity, perhaps the time we spend waiting is the time we need to prepare ourselves for whatever comes next, the catastrophe or the miracle. May your time waiting be the time you need to change, to heal, and to ask yourself the most important questions. We are all waiting to know more and see when we will get to where we are going, wherever that may be. Whatever you're waiting for today, let's remind each other that we are not waiting alone. Take care. Our benediction today comes from the Irish poet John O'Donoghue. This is from Blessing for the Interim Time. What is being transfigured here is your mind, and it is difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival in the new dawn. May love hold us until we meet again. The service begins when the service ends. Bless your hearts. Amen.
We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.